Hello there, and a very warm welcome to Chazingdra Chats, the show where we take a stroll through the life stories of people in the Pokémon community, discovering the 6 Pokémon on their dream team along the way. I'm Charlie Merriman, merry by name, merry by nature, otherwise known as Chazingdra, a host and commentator for the Pokémon Video Game Championship Series, and a content creator. And this week, as every week, I very much hope my guest and I can make your day merry, because I have the pleasure of being joined by Mike GREGAN Ellis. Mike, how you doing?
I'm very good, thank you. I'm very excited to be here. I love the format of the podcast, and I've been excited getting my 6 Pokemon together, so can't wait to reveal them.
Excellent stuff, Mike, excellent stuff. Yes, you said very early on, like a couple of hours after I invited you on the show, that you had your 6 Pokemon ready to go. So I cannot wait to take a deeper dive. Now, of course, Mike and I, we know each other through casting, but before I say too much more, Mike, why don't you give a fuller introduction to yourself?
Well, I'm a Pokemon trading card game commentator, which is how I know Charlie, and I've been commentating now for 3 years. And pretty much before that, I was working in the esports industry, so commentated Rocket League, coached a bit of Rocket League, been in the Minecraft space, but I've been involved in gaming now for almost a decade when it comes to the working side of it. So Pokemon is just the current journey that I've been on as part of many different places I've been.
Yeah, many different places, and they're all places we will visit over the course of this recording. Alrighty, well, what we're going to kick things off with here, official Nintendo magazine community is your first topic.
Yeah, I mean, back in the day, I was trying to find my people, and throughout my school life, I was very much a nerd who couldn't find other nerds. And the official Nintendo magazine was something I started getting into. I started reading it every week. I had the subscription, was coming through, and I just fell in love with this Nintendo community that was kind of brewing in early Facebook days. And there was a lot of people on there who were kind of acting like a Discord community would now, but this was pre-Discord. And we used to spend a lot of time together chatting through new games, and quite a lot of them were really into Pokemon. I also started making some YouTube videos where one of my videos that I made for the group was to teach him how to do a method to increase the likelihood of getting shinies. And they really enjoyed it, but I just recorded it with a webcam looking at my game, and then it ended up blowing up and getting hundreds of thousands of views, and it was kind of like my first foray into making videos and not really knowing what I was doing, but kind of just accidentally creating something that went out to the internet.
I had no idea that was your sort of dipping of the toe in the water of content creation. The fact that it started, in fact, with the Pokemon video games. Which game would that have been?
That would have been White, I think it was. And it was like an egg hatching technique, and what was funny about it is the whole video was about how you can increase your likelihood of getting shinies, and then in the video I didn't even get a shiny, and then shared it with this community, and people were messaging me like, 26 eggs, I got a shiny, and I'm like, congratulations, and there I am, thousands of eggs on, not getting a shiny, and just being the bearer of good news to the community. But yeah, that was sort of where it started, and that was sort of my first experience of a gaming community as well, which is now something that I've jumped from gaming community to community probably 20-30 times over, as I've found new people with different games, different interests over the years. So yeah, it was very much where it all started.
Are you saying that it was a Facebook page for the official Nintendo magazine?
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, and they actually used comments on the Facebook page in the magazine, and funny story about that is I commented not realizing that they would go into the magazine potentially on a post. It appeared in the magazine. I can't actually remember which copy it was. I've been trying to find it and go back, and every time I go back to my parents, but a friend at school recognized my name in the official Nintendo magazine, and then they ended up becoming my best friend off the back of it. So this magazine really set me up for that kind of experience of friendship through gaming, which is now what I value as the most important part of gaming, is the connections, the people, the friendship. So it very much formed that joy of gaming for me.
Yeah, as you say, definitely an early proto version of Discord that we have now that is so good at linking these communities together. Now, you said that, you know, you felt like a bit of a fish out of water at school. You had these nerdy interests, and, you know, nerdiness is just something that we need to own, and we do own these days, and encourage anyone listening who feels like a nerd in their own way just to embrace that term. You know, it just means that you're passionate about something, and that's a wonderful thing. But you're right, there are these days so many more ways for people who have these nerdy interests like us to connect. So back then, you felt like there wasn't really anyone at school who shared the same interest as you. So are you playing the Pokemon games and there's none of your friends at school are doing the same?
Yeah, kind of. It's one of those where I was friendly with everyone because I was multifaceted. I did sport, I was academic, I also then was nerdy, so I kind of connected with all different groups. I was a little bit musical too, so I hung out with the musical people. But then it really was this passion for gaming that I kind of like pushed away because I felt like it wasn't something I should do. And then as I started getting into the official Nintendo magazine, I got into competitive Pokemon, looking into the maths of it. You know, I was doing all these kind of training methods to improve my Pokemon. And I was one of those people who'd use the less used Pokemon like Kadabra rather than using an Alakazam because I thought it was cool to use a unevolved Pokemon, even though there was just no benefit to it other than that it was unexpected. And I was doing all that, really falling in love with the competitive side, the social side, and then also just the fact that it's something you could study in a way, you know, like because I was quite academic, I enjoyed deep diving into things and was always looking at ways to understand games on a higher level, and Pokemon allowed me to do that at first. Later on, Minecraft was the case, but it was that kind of friend who I met through the official Nintendo magazine where we would spend all day talking about how we're going to optimize Pokemon, how we were going to play Super Smash Brothers at a higher level, whatever it was. We were trying to find a way to maximize our ability in a game. And maybe in hindsight, if I'd known that there was the Play Pokemon system, I would have got involved in it and been going to a local if there was one nearby. But I just wasn't aware that that was about back then. And that only started to come into my life as I got to this older age where I was more aware of the competitive landscape of esports and now Pokemon. Yeah,
really interesting that it was the video game that you lent into in the competitive sense as well. So I'm looking forward to hearing over the course of this what caused that pivot into the trading card game. And you're saying that you alluded to this earlier. You had a passion for gaming generally, not just Pokemon. Was it a case of you had certain franchises that were your favourites? Or was it literally just any competitive video game you could sink your teeth into?
Yeah, well, growing up, I always felt envious of everyone else having this PlayStation 2 console or Xbox and all the cool games they could play on that. But we were a Nintendo household. We had a GameCube, we had Game Boys, DSs, these kinds of things. And I think I realised at a certain point that I resonated and appreciated these games way more than I would have other franchises. So I started to fall in love with Pokemon. I've played every Pokemon game and many of the secondary games in the series. I love Mystery Dungeon, played Pokemon Ranger, all of these kinds of games. And I tried to max out the accounts and get the full Pokedex and everything, and would get obsessive with every game that I played. And I think that's something that Nintendo have always done so well, is the games have this deep lore and deep direction you can take them. So another game would have been Animal Crossing. I tried to maximize my village in Animal Crossing. Monster Hunter was another game that I really got into and started to try and get to the point where I had everything you could get in the game and understand how everything interacted with each other. Legend of Zelda, Super Mario, all of these kind of games where there was a end game, but there was also this side questing of getting all of the achievements that you could get in the game. So I think Nintendo started to really become my favourite franchise, and so consequently I've stuck to Nintendo consoles. But as I got to an age where I had a laptop where I could play games and I got into Minecraft, I started to get into PC gaming a little bit more. But when it comes to consoles, it's always been Nintendo.
Amazing. Well, sowing the seeds for the journey that's about to blossom. But before we do that, it's now time to discover what's going to be the first Pokemon on your dream team. So as a reminder, everyone, the aim here is not for Mike to build the most competitively viable team in any way, just the Pokemon that have been the most special to Mike over the years. And he's decided on these in advance. I have no idea what they are. So let's find out together. Mike, what's Pokemon number 1?
Well, I'm going to give a special shout out to the 7th Pokemon that didn't make the list, which was my Tyranitar that was called Green Giant, but where every letter that spelled out the name Gregan was capitalized in it. So it was like capital G, capital R, lowercase e, capital E, and you can imagine it, and it had Gregan mixed into it. But unfortunately, it just missed out on the cut. But it was Gengar, which ironically is an anagram of Gregan. And it was one of my favorite Pokemon early on. I didn't like it because of the Gregan link, even though that was my username from when I was about 9. And Gengar just was this cool Pokemon that felt powerful. it resonated with my play style as well. I like these fast, powerful attackers that could just sweep a match with their sort of super effective move sets. The classic like nature of a jolly or a timid kind of Pokemon where you could just absolutely rinse through, give it a choice item. And I felt like Gengar early on for me was the first Pokemon that I really started to like see in that way and be the aggressive Pokemon on my team. And then also the way it looks as a Pokemon, I think, is something that kind of symbolic in a lot of the Pokemon I like. It's very scary and powerful, but also a little bit like it's got a quite like emotional side to it. Like Gengar in the anime was always quite cheeky, and it would have all these different moments. So I really like the way it's designed, and yeah, I could talk about all of these Pokemon a lot, but Gengar has made the list partly because it's an anagram of Gregan.
And for an unfamiliar, Green Giant is a brand of sweet corn here in the UK. And I think Tyranitar, which is a big green Pokemon, is a good link to that. Fascinating as well that you can spell Gregan in the order that the letters appear in Green Giant. That's very cool. I guess the question I have to ask here is the origins of Gregan.
Yeah, it was... I used to play RuneScape with a friend at school whose username was Spuddy34. And I wanted to kind of replicate his naming system. So I chose the number 25 because it was 1 down and 1 up from 34. There was no link to any other number. My birthday is the 26th, so it's really confusing. Why didn't I just go with 26? But Gregan, which was originally pronounced Gregan, was the Australian scrum half in the 2003 Rugby World Cup final for the one which England won. And I just thought his name was cool. I named a wizard in a book that I was writing at school, Gregan, because I thought it was a cool name. And then when I started RuneScape, I was like, I want to be like Gregan the wizard in my book. And then it stuck.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that story before. And it's so cool that it goes all the way back to a very, very, very young Mike Ellis. And we were talking about lore, and it's the lore behind that name as well. I think I know now why it's Gregan, not Gregan, the pronunciation anymore, but I think we will cover that as the episode goes on, perhaps. Anyway, though, Gengar, I think that's really well summarized as well in terms of it's cool, but also emotional in the broadest sense, right? The cheekiness is, an emotion. Emotional doesn't necessarily have to mean sad, of course. And so I'm looking forward to seeing how that theme continues over the rest of your Pokemon. So Gengar, welcome to Gregan's Dream Team. And everybody, if you're enjoying the chat with Mike, please do like and subscribe. It really would mean such a huge amount. I put a lot of work into these episodes. Would be fantastic to have you following along and showing your support. But we've got so much more conversation to have, so we'll move on from there. We'll shadow ball over from there into your Minecraft era.
Yeah, it was kind of a crazy turn of interests from the Nintendo games over to PC gaming. I was watching a lot of YouTube and really getting into the early gaming YouTube, and Minecraft became this game that so many creators were playing, and they were playing it in their own unique way. No one played it the same. And so I'd watch all these different creators and want to experience my own story in Minecraft. So, I download the game, I get really into it, I try and min-max like every game that I do. And Minecraft at the time was quite difficult to build well in because there wasn't a huge amount of options. But then my creative started to get really into the building aspect of it. And so I applied for various different build teams and got rejected from a few of them. But then got really lucky that Nox Crew accepted me into their build team. And anyone who knows Minecraft now will know of the Nox Crew because they're probably the most prestigious build team in Minecraft. They make the Minecraft Championship Series, which has all of the biggest Minecraft creators in it. And when I joined Nox Crew, it was this really talented group of people who were building amazing things but didn't quite have that breakthrough potential that a lot of the other Minecraft build teams had, because they weren't making this kind of viral content of like super builds. It was more about the kind of fun experience side of Minecraft and making fun games through a series they had called the Nox Crew Game Show, which now is the Minecraft Championship Series. So Nox Crew was this incredible group of musicians, coders, artists, like business people, who kind of formed my early experience of the gaming industry having these jobs that people could do. Now, none of us were full-time for the Nox Crew. It was all like a hobby team at the time. They're now all working for the Nox Crew pretty much. But it was this experience of going to events with a group of people, seeing the industry, going to Insomnia Gaming Festival. We went every single event, and just seeing this world of professional people working around games, and it completely opened my eyes to what was possible in the gaming industry. So I have to thank Minecraft for that, because if it wasn't for Minecraft, I wouldn't be where I am now. So yeah, amazing game.
Clearly, you've always had a very entrepreneurial streak. I don't know if entrepreneurial is exactly the right word, really, but following your passions, putting yourself out there, and just seeing where they lead. Because, so how old would you have been when you started to do this?
I think I was about 16, 17 with the Nox crew.
Yeah. Okay, wow. I mean, at this point in your schooling, were there others around you who had similar interests doing a similar thing, or was this just under your own steam, you looked into it and you applied yourself?
I don't think anyone else was doing gaming like I was, but I had friends who were pushing the limits of tech, and they were kind of inspiring me to kind of go out there and try new things with tech. But yeah, I think Minecraft was just, I met the right people online. You know, you can very easily get caught up in the wrong people online. You know, that's something I've seen a lot of friends fall into. But when it comes to Nox crew, they were just these incredible people, and still to this day, I think about how much I learned from them in terms of their passion for Minecraft. It was also a very open-minded community, and everyone was so intelligent as well, and they were pushing themselves to try and do these crazy innovative things. And so I think in that sense, I was very lucky to meet the right group of gamers. And I'm really happy that the majority of the people I was with in that community have been rewarded for their talents. So yeah, I think I just got really lucky, to be honest.
Gaming now compared to the concept of gaming then, they're very different things. Would you say that back then you felt like no one else was really doing this, and, you know, when you found Nox crew, it was a rare find, and you were sort of being a bit of a trailblazer in that sense?
Yeah, a little bit. I think not many people fully understood it. You know, I didn't even know what esports were back then, and at these gaming events, you'd see there was an esports stage, and we would be like, oh, should we go down and have a look and see what's going on there? And you go down, there'd be like a Halo tournament going on. And I remember thinking, this is stupid. Why is anyone watching people do competitive gaming? And then lo and behold, Rocket League comes out, and it just was something I completely understood and got. And I think, yeah, definitely we were early movers. But you go along to these events, and there's a massive LAN hall, there's huge booths, and there's loads of visitors there to watch their favorite gaming creators. And I think it was one of those that it was the unspoken thing that was going on, where especially since the pandemic, there's been a lot more experience within the gaming space, because people were kind of forced into it. And so they would be watching YouTubers gaming, or they would be engaging in gaming themselves. But definitely like 10 years ago, it was an unexpected hobby if someone said that they were going to a gaming event or a gaming convention. So I've kind of just seen it evolve over the years from being this nerdy space which people didn't really want to be a part of because they weren't their people, to having, you know, families with kids that are just there to see their favorite YouTuber, you know? So it's evolved a lot.
Fascinating. What did your parents make of all this? Were they supportive of the amount of gaming you were doing and leaning into?
Interesting question. I think it varied from period to period. I think I went to an Insomnia Gaming Festival in the Easter holidays just before my A-levels, and I don't think they were best pleased when I said I was going to do that. But then when I got my results back, I seem to remember my dad being a bit almost annoyed that I got away with it. You know, he was like, how have you got away with this? And like, I was playing Minecraft all day the day before a biology exam, stuff like that. So yeah, I think they were just a little bit sort of they didn't understand that I worked hard at school so that I could come home and game. And, you know, I was also doing a lot of sport at the time. So, you know, I'm trying to balance going to school, staying after school to do sport, go home, do homework, then do some gaming. So I had to be ultra efficient with everything that I did. And thankfully, like, I had pretty good schooling. I was well taught. I had a lot of free periods to be able to do my homework while I was at school. I was the kind of person who didn't go out at lunch break. I'd always do my hobbies at lunch or some homework at lunch, you know. So I found the time to be able to enjoy my hobby. then I think as time has gone on, my parents have been very supportive of the whole thing. You know, they've always tuned into the Rocket League tournaments. You know, they were supportive of the whole Nox Crew thing and would, you know, ask about it all the time. And I think it was when I was at university, there was another moment where they were like, just focus on your studies. You can do this afterwards. And I decided to drop out of university. A little bit of a spoiler for later on, but I decided to drop out. And that was another time where there was some tension over it. But I think they understood that it was something I was truly passionate about, and that I wasn't just doing it for the sake of taking my time away from important things. I was doing it because I saw there was a future in it, and I've been fortunate enough that was a good decision. Not everyone gets that lucky, so my brash decisions ended up being the right choice in the end.
My final quick question on this point is, Minecraft is very much the focus in this era, so Pokemon's taken a backseat?
I think so. I mean, every Minecraft update was like the most important time in my gaming life. You know, I was ready to play it like crazy. Every Pokemon release was the most important time in my life. I would play it like crazy. So I think my attention did jump around from game to game, but Minecraft was this constant that whenever I got home, I would jump on Minecraft, or I'd jump into the call with people on Minecraft. You know, like it was always there. I think a lot of modern gaming style is you have that daily game that you go to. And I think Minecraft was one of those first games for a lot of people where it was almost like habitual that you'd get in and be on Minecraft in your survival world, on your server with your friends or whatever it was. So yeah, it was always a constant, but Pokemon has always been there every single big game release.
I see. Okay, fascinating. Well, speaking of Pokemon, now it's time to learn who's going to be joining Gengar. Who's going to be Pokemon number 2 on your dream team?
Okay, so we said about how Gengar's pretty cool, and I think my next one is unanimously agreed to be pretty cool across the Pokemon community, and that's Umbreon. I think Umbreon has just always resonated with me because of how it looks. I think it's my favorite EV evolution. I think it's the way it evolves is another big factor. So pretty much every playthrough, I try and maximize the number of friendship evolutions there are, because I love the experience of a Pokemon evolving at a random moment. And it's always, with Umbreon, it's always exciting because then it's like, is it going to be an Espeon or is it going to be an Umbreon? And then you've got to try and almost like strategically evolve it. And then I also think it was one of those that I used quite a lot in my early competitive days too. It was my go-to tanky Pokemon, so I used it a lot as well. So there's lots of reasons why I like it, but ultimately in my list of 6, it represents that friendship evolution. Crobat was almost in the list as well. I love a Crobat, and I just love that experience of seeing it evolve at any old level.
That's a really interesting way of playing through the games and a fascinating way of putting it. Yeah, keeping that surprise element of exactly when it's going to be evolving. And it represents so well the community that you were talking about just then with Minecraft. You're all friends who are helping each other, and you, by this point, you know, compared to the first topic you talked to us about, had more found your people. So that's wonderful to hear. Yeah, and again, going back to your competitive video game Pokemon experience. But from here, now we will moonlight, foul play, snarl, over from there into university.
Yeah, went to Sheffield University. It was an amazing place to go. Weirdly, the founder of Nox Crew was from Sheffield, so my Minecraft life carried on whilst I was there in a physical sense. I was there with real people, socializing regularly, and one of my best friends was from the Nox Crew. I ended up living with someone from the Nox Crew all up in Sheffield, so the city was a big part of my joy of university. But I was studying medicine at university. So those exams I didn't revise for, I thankfully did well enough in them to get into medicine. And it was intense. Like, I was studying one of the hardest degrees at university and trying to balance it alongside this hobby that I had that was growing more and more prevalent in my life. Minecraft was harder and harder to commit to. And I was still going to these gaming events and getting less involved in the gaming side, and heavily getting involved in the sports side at university as well. You know, that alongside socializing, it was really hard to juggle everything. And in my second year, my gaming experience got a little bit too far to the extreme side, and I had to retake the year because I was essentially streaming and gaming too much. because it was around the time Rocket League came out. I was obsessed with Rocket League, and it became this game that I could see. I don't know, I just saw it like no other game before. It was something I could see the future of. I loved it. I loved the playing of it. Every goal felt amazing. And I started streaming it as well. And so then I'd spend, 3 or 4 hours every evening playing Rocket League on stream. And I was fortunate enough to have a pre-built stream community. Most streamers start with 1-2 viewers. I was lucky enough to have 20 to 30 viewers through a friend of mine that I made content with. His community kind of came over. And then consequently, I was getting a bit of money coming in from it, and I was getting addicted to this feeling of content creation, streaming, and making daily videos, all the while trying to study. And it just meant that one thing had to break, and unfortunately, the Rocket League was almost compulsive. It got a bit unhealthy, and so I had to retake the year and had to sort of reevaluate my personal health. Someone who'd been sporty my whole life, I'd suddenly stopped exercising, was doing all-nighters where I'd never done an all-nighter beforehand. And yeah, essentially had to go get some help about it. Thankfully, it didn't get too bad, but it was definitely a point in my life where I realized that I have this addictive personality and that I have to be able to keep control of it and use it in a positive way. All of the other things I've mentioned before this point, I was an obsessive person. I was obsessed with studying, I was obsessed with sport, I was obsessed with gaming, and they'd led me to a successful position of being at university studying one of the toughest degrees. But you get to a point in your life when you're like that, where things get too difficult, and suddenly you have to control that obsession when it's being distracted and direct it into positive things. And I think that's where the next year of university, I studied really hard and made sure that I got through that year. And so, yeah, it was quite an important time in my life where I understood myself, and the risk I have of going off the track that I was presenting my life with. And at this point it was to become a doctor. But yeah, it's definitely coming down the line when I've been trying to be an entrepreneur, as you mentioned, trying to make sure you focus on the right things and making sure things didn't distract me along the way. So yeah, it was an important point in my life to make sure that I stayed focused.
Thank you very much for your honesty there. Wow. I'm sorry it's such a difficult time, but I guess, at some point in all of our lives, we have to learn our limits by pushing ourselves too far. That lesson will come crashing down on us at some point. Okay. And then, so at what point did it lead to you then dropping out of university?
Well, in my second year, I retook that year because I was streaming too much. And I was also commentating a lot. I didn't mention that. With the streaming, it wasn't just my stream. It was commentating community events where I wasn't getting paid for most of them. And if I was getting paid, it wasn't enough to consider it a job. But I was getting into this whole performative online thing. But then in my third year, I got an offer to go out and work at an event in LA. And the way it came about was mad. It was for Clash Royale. It wasn't a game I'd ever even played before at the time. I got a message through a contact who's connected through the Rocket League world saying, hey, we're looking for UK talent for an upcoming esport. The first season of this esport is Clash Royale. Are you interested? And I went, I don't know anything about Clash Royale, but I'd be interested to learn it. I can learn this quickly enough, and I can definitely do it. And so they said, yeah, we'll get you for an interview. Flights next weekend. Do you want to come out? And I'm thinking, my goodness, my exams are in 2 weeks' time. If I fly out to LA, then I'm missing out on a lot of revision time in preparation for this exam. And I had to balance up, if I go out to this and I pass my exam, it's great. If I go out to this and I fail my exam, I'll be in LA when the resits happen. So I'd have to essentially drop out of university by default. And if I don't go out and I pass or fail my exam, I can, do the resit as is normal, but I won't get this opportunity in the industry. And I speak it through with my family. They say, you're not going out there. You've already reset a year. You can't do this at this point. That's just not smart or healthy. And I'm thinking, yeah, but what happens if I get it? You know, that's a huge opportunity. So I end up defying my parents' advice. They fall out with me completely, and I understand why, you know, especially as I'm resitting the year. And I fly out to LA, and they end up giving me the role of host on this Clash Royale Esports. I end up passing my exams and then I end up casting this event. Well, I was hosting, actually, so I wasn't casting. So I was the least knowledgeable on the broadcast in theory, and I had to learn the game for the event. And this is my first experience of that kind of thing. I didn't know who any of the players were. I had to do all this research. I had to download the game and play it in the hotel room before my interview. And then consequently, they did all these test runs of me, and I didn't know what anything was called. I don't know how they managed to give me the job, but that was my first experience in proper paid work and opportunities. And at that event, I ended up meeting Team Vitality, who were then the people I worked with afterwards. But I did then come back to university and do another year at university. So I didn't at this point drop out. I still carried on. And it was once Team Vitality offered me a job that I realised I couldn't balance the two. I was being paid a full-time wage at Vitality whilst I was studying at university to get a degree that would take me another 3 years. So it's not like it was just around the corner. It was going to take a while. And I just at that point couldn't balance everything. So I ended up dropping out. So yeah, it took a while after this kind of tough point in university. I did try and rebalance the ship. I tried to get to the end before dropping out.
Wow, really fascinating. If you, in hindsight, knowing, you know, the way your life has gone, and knowing, of course, that medicine is an incredibly intense degree, what else did you enjoy at school that you could have studied that might have been a bit more conducive?
You know, I've thought about this a lot, because I probably would have finished the degree if it wasn't medicine, because I was at university for 3.5 years. So most degrees are 3 years. I probably would have finished it if it was 3 years or 4 years. And probably chemistry would be something like, it was my strongest subject at school, maybe an engineering of some sort. But yeah, probably something very logical like chemistry that had a practical side to it. But even just something like sports science, because I really enjoy the sports side. And I actually recently had an idea to go back to university about 1.5 years ago, and I was tempted to go back and study psychology, or sports psychology more specifically. And that would have probably been a great decision, but I wouldn't have known it was a great decision at the time, because I wasn't fascinated by psychology going into university. That's very much something that I've enjoyed since being in the performative esports space. But yeah, there's all sorts of things that probably would have done me better than medicine, but ultimately it led me to where I am today. So, you know, I wouldn't change it. I just wish I had a degree and didn't have to put A-levels as my highest form of education whenever I did a job application.
I mean, ultimately, you know, you chose medicine over anything else at the time because you were passionate about it, and so it was the right thing to do. You didn't know where things would have gone. A lot of pressure and a lot of big decisions for a young university-aged student to make. So, I know we're about to talk much more about your full-time esports, but before we do, let's learn who's going to be joining Gengar and Umbreon on your dream team.
Oh, well, this is you'll know this is a competitive video game Pokemon when I say it, because it's one of the most notable. It's Porygon 2. So back when I was doing the competitive Pokemon, there was a certain item I was obsessed with, because it felt like no one else realized how good it was, and that was Eviolite. Because I really got into competitive Pokemon in Black and White era, which is where I think Eviolite came out. And so
I think so, yeah.
I was trying all these different combinations of Pokemon that could evolve. And like I said before, I was obsessed with these underused Pokemon that could evolve. Now, Kadabra, the one I explained earlier on, was not the best user of Eviolite, but Porygon 2 just seemed to be this crazy combination. I think Scyther was another one that I like to use as well. But it was that Porygon 2, and I felt like I'd broken the game. And now I think it's one of the most powerful Pokemon that still is good enough to this day, even though it was a Gen 2 Pokemon. But I remember thinking, no one can knock this out. It's got pretty good stats. I can heal all this damage away. It's got good typing for longevity. Like, everything about it just made sense to me. And then I started to just love the way it looked. And I think that's something that a lot of people will resonate with when you have a Pokemon that you like the way it plays. And as time goes on, you start to fall in love with the Pokemon a little bit. Everything about it, I just sort of think it's a great little Pokemon, and gave me a lot of joy when I played with it.
Yeah, the Eviolite, of course, bolsters the defences of a Pokemon that can still evolve. So Porygon 2 does indeed become very bulky. And you're right, yeah. It often sees success, sort of no matter the format, to a certain extent. But really interesting that you were on that Porygon 2 Eviolite train before, or one of the first to be on that train, I guess, we'll say. I love this theme of the Pokemon that are yet to evolve, and I think it ties in so well with this part of your story, because it represents that potential. It can still evolve, but it is making the best of what it had at the time, and you were very much in a formative period in your life where you didn't quite know what you were going to evolve into, let's say. So Porygon 2 makes total sense here. Now, try attacking over from there into full-time esports.
Yeah, exactly. I mentioned the story of Team Vitality and how I met them through Clash Royale, but before that I was kind of one of 3 European Rocket League commentators. So it was me, a guy called Shogun, and a guy called Johnny Boy. Now, the 3 of us at the start were, depending on who you asked, were the best casters. Shogun, by far the hypest guy. He's got the most famous call out in Rocket League history of "This is Rocket League," which I'm sure some of the listeners will have seen if they know anything about Rocket League. I was thinking, if they're going to get another European guy, it's going to be me, and I'm ready to take on the role of the next European guy, because they had Shogun from early days, and it just sort of never happened, and I was sort of waiting for my call up, my big moment. And sort of 2 years into Rocket League esports, it never happened. So I thought, do you know what? Coaching is another big passion of mine. I've done it my whole life with sport. Let's see if I can get into that. So I coached a few teams, managed a few teams here and there. And then when Vitality reached out, they said, hey, we're looking to get a top 4 team that we hope to one day become world champions. And we'll give you this money here to scout us out a team. And I went away and I did the most in-depth scouting document I could. Every team in the top 16, I put their details, their history. Have they got a content avenue? Are they open to be possible to pick up? All these different things. And I ended up landing on the first iteration of Team Vitality they went for. And they sort of said to me, they're like, we like the way you work. Would you like to come and manage the team? And I thought, do you know what? I've had enough of being that commentator who could get the call up, that I'm ready to take that leap. And weirdly, the last event I commentated before Team Vitality, that team was signed with Team Vitality. I was their manager, but they were going under a name called Guess Who, so they were ready to be picked up. And they came 4th in this tournament that I was commentating. I ended up commentating my team before I was with them. And it ended up being one of the most amazing experiences I could ever ask for. I was very thankful for Team Vitality. I was there through their biggest growth spurt. They had a lot of investment. So they, as an organization, grew a lot. And the team developed a lot in the first year. And then in the second year, we had the most incredible year where we won the World Championship, came second at the World Championship. There was 2 a year. We were European champion and runners-up in Europe. We came second at a big LAN event, top 4 at another big LAN event. We had this incredible season, and that was 2018, the first one. Then 2019 was the season we were really successful. And that 2-year stint at Vitality kind of set me up for the rest of my career, because it meant that I was one of the first manager coaches to achieve a world championship in Rocket League. The season 6, the previous season before me, they didn't really have an official manager coach. So technically, in some people's eyes, I was the first coach to win a world championship, because it didn't really become a thing until after season 7, season 8, where it became more normalized. So yeah, I was just really lucky to be involved at the right time in Rocket League esports, get this opportunity with Vitality. And they have carried on that legacy for the last 5 years, and they've won another world championship. They're the highest earning Rocket League team by org, and recently got nominated for Team of the Decade in the Esports Awards. So I was very fortunate to be the first stage of that incredible journey of that team, and still to this day, it's the main achievement that I would look back on my career and say that was the moment.
Wow. You said you'd always had a passion for coaching, so you had experience with teaching of some kind over the years? What made you discover this passion for teaching Rocket League?
Yeah, I mean, probably like 13, 14, I was coaching people. So I coached cricket at quite a young age. I also ran this is a completely weird off-piece thing I did. I did African drumming. So I used to play the djembe, and I ran a drumming group at school where I coached year sevens how to do African drumming and would lead them in concerts. Anyway, that's something that was part of my teaching. And then when I got to university, I got involved in Ultimate Frisbee and was the club captain for Ultimate Frisbee and did a lot of coaching through that. And yeah, I did strength and conditioning coaching at university. That was just a sort of side thing that I really enjoyed doing. So I've always just enjoyed supporting others in their journey and helping them grow and develop as a person. And so it very naturally fit in Rocket League to start coaching. And I did that from as soon as I got to a level where people were interested in what I had to say. And interestingly, I was one of the first people to theorize and create YouTube tutorials around the movement in Rocket League, which we called rotations. Every tutorial up to that point had been about mechanics, so how your car interacts with the ball. And at the point where I started seeing the game in a different way, I theorized and created these ideologies on how you could move around the pitch in a more optimal way. And so consequently, my tabletop tactics, they were called, were the first rotation-based tutorials for the community.
Well, let's zoom over from there now into what's going to be the fourth Pokemon on your dream team alongside Gengar, Umbreon, and Porygon 2.
Right, it's time for the favourite Pokemon. It has to be my boy, and I've definitely fallen in love with him more recently. It's Metagross. I absolutely adore Metagross. I've always been a fan of the powerhouse Pokemon and how they seem to be better than every other Pokemon when it comes to their stats and their performance in battle. But Metagross, for some reason, I just resonate with it. I don't know. I always have. And then in the last sort of 3 or 4 years, I think I've lent into it more. I think especially with the commentary side, it's that kind of, you want to have a favorite Pokemon, and then consequently I've now started collecting Metagross cards. I've got a bunch of Metagross toys. I show it with the camera up here. I've got all these Metagross up here, and yeah, I think it's just it's that falling in love thing. It gets easier the more people ask you what's your favorite Pokemon, and then you can confidently say that Pokemon out loud, and that's Metagross.
What is it then about Metagross that it's sort of over the course of time just been solidified as your favorite Pokemon? But what was the kernel that spoke to you about Metagross?
I think it just felt so overpowered when I played with it. And it was that steel type that I've always liked, steel type Pokemon. I think it was the kind of way it held itself. It looked physically powerful, but it's also that kind of underlying intelligence that's associated with Metagross. I think the shiny form as well. I was sucker for the shiny Metagross. And I think all of those combined together, and it's the Pokemon I played through the most with in game. I think even just the grind of having Beldum be so, for use of a better word, pathetic when you're using it in a playthrough, and how much you have to grind to get that evolution almost reminds me of that Magikarp into Gyarados feeling. Not quite to that same extreme, but yeah, the grind of getting Beldum up to a Metagross feels so rewarding. So yeah, all those factors combined together.
Really interesting. Yeah, shiny Pokemon, for anyone unfamiliar, exceptionally rare variants of Pokemon that are different colours and sparkle on encounter. So each Pokemon will have a shiny variant. And I'm reminded at this point, Mike, of, you said you're collecting Metagross cards. Very kindly at EUIC last year gave me a card of one of the cards of my favourite Pokemon, Kingdra, which I have proudly sort of in a little shrine in my bedroom with other Kingdra cards. So thank you very much for all that, Mike. Thank you for spreading the favourite Pokemon via card love around. But Metagross, welcome to the team. Now we're going to stomp over from there into London life.
Yeah, wow. It was a big jump in my life. I'd lived in Sheffield through university. I stayed there for my online working life with Vitality, and it's quite a nice place to live, quite cheap. So I was able to survive on this kind of unknown income of esports. But then I took this risk of jumping down to London off the back of working with Guild Esports, who were this new innovative esports org that were backed by David Beckham. It was based in London, but they didn't have an HQ yet, and we were working with the Rocket League team. I was the scout of the team, coaching and managing it. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to take the jump and take the leap and move to London and start that kind of young career in London, you know, going out and networking and so on. And I actually moved down the November 2020. So it was actually quite cheap to live in London relative to how much it became once everyone started moving back, because everyone was moving out to get into the countryside and work from home. And so I took this leap and I moved into Stratford area. And it was amazing. I made all these incredible friends online. I started streaming Among Us and played a lot of Among Us with some amazing content creators who then ended up being my social life when I could start to socialize with people in person. And so many great business opportunities were formed by me being in London. So I had this sort of prioritizing work life period of my career, which is also where I started commentating Rocket League again and getting involved in the RLCS. So I had my highest earning point in my career. I was the fittest and healthiest I'd been. I got really into CrossFit and got super in shape, and then was also the most sociable I'd been in my life, doing all these parties and network events and invite events for people in the esports and gaming space, and then realized very quickly that it was not for me, and ended up deciding to leave London, which was the best decision I ever made, but at the time was incredibly tough because I didn't know what was right anymore. I'd spent my whole life making these lucky decisions that jumped me from great opportunity to great opportunity, and suddenly I was at a crossroad where I was no longer on an upward trajectory and instead working out how to stabilize my life. And then that's where I ended up having to leave London. I think that's quite common of a lot of people, is they go for this crazy burst of spending so much money to live in London, trying to make something of it, and then if it doesn't work out, they end up just moving away and settling down or going back to their parents or whatever it is.
Briefly, RLCS, presumably Rocket League Championship Series.
Yes, that's it. Sorry.
Yeah.
I forget that these words aren't common knowledge, but thank you for sharing that with everyone.
Otherwise, I think we can work it out from context. But yeah. Okay. At what point did you become aware that London just wasn't for you? Was it sort of always a question in your mind?
I think I took some risky decisions that was based off of income that I didn't know I had. And I think there was a point where I could acknowledge my money was going down rather than up, that I started to realize that it just wasn't sustainable for me. And a lot of it was my mental health, my physical health started to decline. And I think a lot of that just stemmed from trying to carry on this lifestyle of super successful GREGAN, who was, I felt, to use an arrogant term, I felt untouchable. You know, I felt like whatever I did, I would smash it. You know, I could go to any event and do the best job ever commentating. You know, I'd go home and I'd live stream. There'd be loads of people watching, and it was, I definitely got ahead of myself and stopped that kind of grind set that had got me to where I was. And I was almost like comfortable doing the not bare minimum, because I still worked hard when I was at these events, but I wasn't working hard to make opportunities anymore. I was just enjoying the fruits of my labor, and consequently was burning myself out to a point where I needed to get away from it. One of the nice things was the Pokemon trading card game was this weekly getaway that I was able to go to. I was part of a community of amazing London players, where I started when I was in Sheffield in 2019. And so I met this amazing community of people in London who I still keep in touch with. I meet them at all the events now as a commentator, and that was my escape from this world that was almost falling apart as it was getting challenging.
And here we have the first entry, really, of the Pokemon trading card game. So at what point, you know, you've delved into the video game so much, at what point did that switch to the trading card game?
So when I was about probably 15, I got a bunch of code cards so I could play the trading card game online on PTCGO. And that would have been around the black and white era. So that was a long time ago. So I did enjoy the competitive TCG. And like I mentioned before, if I'd known about Play Pokemon, maybe I'd have got involved in it earlier in seniors and competed. But I enjoyed competitive Pokemon, but I just couldn't afford it. And I didn't want to spend the little money that I had buying packs and things like that. I was saving up for university and all these things. And then it was when I got my bonus at Vitality for winning the World Championship, I said to myself, what is one thing that I've always wanted to buy but could never buy because it was money that I felt was meant to be for other things. So this bonus was that opportunity to spend. And it was a toss-up between Lego, Pokemon trading card game, and poker. And I was debating which of these three routes I was going to go down. And ultimately, I'd watched loads of YouTubers opening Pokemon trading card game, and I was like, do you know what? This is what I've always wanted to do. I've loved Pokemon my whole life. Let me get into it. And then I did the whole search for the local store, and then found an amazing local store within walking distance, got involved, and very quickly was like, I want to be competitive. And weirdly, the second or third regional that happened after I got into it was the Sheffield regional. But I was in America when the Sheffield regional happened, so I couldn't play in my first ever regional event back then. But yeah, through that, I watched the World Championship that season, fell in love with Tord Reklev. I was like, wow, this guy's incredible. Look at him. He's coming up with these innovative decks, and now he's someone I can call a friend. And it's, you know, it's crazy how back then I was just getting into the TCG and didn't realize it was going to lead to meeting my partner, being my career, being my favorite hobby, and all these things. It was just a very fortunate scenario that I chose wisely.
So Pokemon is starting to rise to the surface once more, but before we continue, now it's time to learn what's going to be the fifth Pokemon on your dream team, alongside Gengar, Umbreon, Porygon 2 and Metagross.
Well, this one is quite nice to be following on from talks about the trading card game, because it's a Pokemon that I didn't really resonate with in the video game, but as I played it in the TCG, it's one of my favourite Pokemon to play, and that's Dragapult, which is currently a very meta deck. It's it's frequently winning tournaments at the moment, and I recently won my second ever big tournament locally with a Dragapult deck, so that was an amazing experience. But the first ever tournament I won in person that was not a challenge, so it was more of a cup style tournament where you have sort of 32 players and the top 8 into a winner. I won that with Dragapult VMAX. So I've gone through 5-6 years of playing the TCG, and the two big tournaments that I've won have both been with Dragapult, and it's the way it plays in the TCG that resonates with the way I like to play, which is this kind of thinking ahead, trying to formulate a complicated strategy and executing it with a little bit of disruption, a little bit of catching your opponent off guard. And Dragapult seems to be that Pokemon. So again, it's similar to what I mentioned with Porygon, of you play with it enough that you start to like the Pokemon itself. And so consequently, Dragapult is in there. Also another powerhouse Pokemon. So I guess it was only poetic that it could be in here.
Yeah, I was about to say Dragapult. Okay, yeah, really, the trading card game rose into the fore now, and that makes total sense in terms of your preferred playstyle, given the coaching that you did before, having to think multiple turns ahead, assessing the game as a whole. And this is the big question that's been in my mind since knowing you, really, Mike. You commentated esports. You have, now I know, such a thorough grounding in the video game, and yet it's the trading card game that you commentate. Whereas, of course, between Rocket League and, say, the Pokemon video game, there are more overlaps. Obviously, the Pokemon video game isn't an esport in quite the same way. I guess Pokemon Unite would be the closest thing to that. Mm. So why is it that you ultimately went into commentating the trading card game? I mean, it might just be as simple as because at the time you were more into the trading card game, but yeah.
I think it's just when I started looking into other games I'd want to commentate, my hobby at the time was the trading card game. It was my main competitive outlet. You know, I used to be sporty, where I suddenly was in a situation where I was gymming through CrossFit. So my competitive nature was having to be directed into the TCG. And as esports have become more and more coach and support focused or commentary focused, I could no longer enter tournaments and get my competitive nature through that. So yeah, I needed to find this place where I could compete, and it was the TCG. And I felt like, and I'm sure looking back on it, I wasn't as in the know as I thought I was. I felt like I was really knowledgeable in the TCG. I was like, do you know what? I could actually commentate this. I'd actually turned down commentating some games because I didn't feel like I was knowledgeable enough. But in hindsight, I probably should have just gone for it and learnt on the job. But TCG, I had this idea in my head that I'd be a great commentator for it. And I ended up getting chucked in at the deep end because I reached out to commentate early on, and they said, yeah, which event can you do out of the next few? And I was like, I'll do that one. And they're like, that sounds great. And then someone dropped out of the event that was in a few weeks' time, and they went, can you last minute come out to this event? And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll come to Warsaw. And so I ended up commentating events sooner than I was ready for, and I didn't know who anyone was. And I genuinely didn't know who any of the players were, except for a few like Tord Reklev and a few of the streamer types. But I remember speaking to Alex Dow and saying, can you teach me who everyone is? And he's like, don't worry, anyone you don't know, you can lean on me and I'll talk about them, or you can quickly research them online. The problem with that is what happens if one of them just walks up to you at the event. And I mistook a world champion because I didn't know who they were. And so I just looked like this absolute charlatan who'd come in. And off the back of that first event, I went away and I did the most research I'd ever done for any competitive commentary, because I just wanted to make sure that if anyone came on, I gave them the due diligence of who they were, their story, what interesting facts I could find about them, and just kept asking questions to the other casters of what can I say about these people. And even to this day, I feel like it's my weakest area, is knowing everyone, but it's really hard in Pokemon because anyone could come up on the stream. But yeah, that was the main reason I went into TCG. Anything can be learned. Maybe the video game could come in future opportunity.
Maybe, yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure you'd thrive. But I guess, yeah, the answer there is just, at the time, yeah, it was the trading card game that was your focus. So, okay, well, Dragonbolt, welcome to the team. And before we round out the stream team, we will Dragon Dart over from there now into full-time work, Norwich, and Pokemon commentary.
Yeah, so I mentioned I wanted to leave London, and Norwich ended up being the choice of place. I had a good friend out here who I visited a few times for their birthday, and on their birthday of July 2023, I think it was, I just said, I think this is where I'm going to live. I think I've found my new home. And then I tried moving pretty soon after that and ended up moving out here in November time. And yeah, it was the best choice I could ever have. I was still working online, coaching a team, wasn't getting paid for it, but I was trying my best to get us to a level where we could get an organization to pay for us and so on. It was just Rocket League was starting to go to this place where there wasn't as many opportunities for paid work. But I carried that on and ended up meeting my amazing girlfriend, Megan, who is, I met at Pokemon, and honestly, it's the best thing that could have ever happened to me through Pokemon, through moving to Norwich and everything. And that was that kind of change of mentality around what I wanted in life. You know, I mentioned in London, I was this young professional trying to get all these opportunities. And suddenly I was thinking about, you know, what is going to work for our life, you know. So she works a 9-to-5 job, so I wanted to get a job that would balance with that, where coaching was weekends and evenings, which just isn't realistic. You're not in sync. I ended up working at Zatu Games as their TCG product manager, which a classic Mike maneuver. I went along and asked them if they wanted some support around setting up a local community, and then I ended up getting the job. And that was the first normal job I'd had, and I was 28. You know, it's the first time I'd had a job where I was working 5 days a week, 9-to-5, and taking home a salary. And that was such a weird experience for me, but it was an eye-opening experience, because I could still do my Pokemon commentary, I could still do all my hobbies and interests. It's the first time I've been able to switch off at a weekend, which I don't know if people quite realize what that's like. Spending your whole life feeling like you should always be working, and then suddenly being in a position where you can go away for the weekend and not have to worry about anything because you have no responsibilities that weekend. So it was a great moment for me to establish what a balanced life was for me. And now I've got a new job. I no longer work at Xatu, but again, I've got a 9 to 5 job where I can enjoy my life outside of that working environment. So, and I've been lucky enough to have 2 great jobs where I enjoy the actual work itself. So, yeah, it's complete 180 in the way my life was going.
Now, has it gone from GREGAN to GREGAN because of Megan?
No, it hasn't actually.
Oh wow!
It was.
I was convinced.
Yeah, because when you said that, I was wondering what you were thinking, and it's interesting that you mentioned that. But it was quite early on. It went from GREGAN to GREGAN because people would read it as Greg, A-N, and so they would just call me Greg or GREGAN. And so as early as the Minecraft days, I was GREGAN. And then, funnily enough, I only started getting called GREGAN again once I started working in America, because to them they read it as GREGAN almost straight away. So yeah, it's been GREGAN for most of the time. So yeah, but it is quite ironic, isn't it, that we've got matching initials and we're rhyming if I use my username. And we've had a few times where I've gone and met some of my friends from the streaming days, from the Rocket League days, and they do the same thing of like, oh, GREGAN and Megan. So yeah, Megan's amazing, and if it wasn't for Pokemon, I would never have met her, and so I'll forever be thankful for Pokemon. But the GREGAN unfortunately does not have a link to that.
I see. Okay, foiled, but okay. Thank you for explaining.
Nice theory.
So you mentioned briefly when I asked this question when you were talking about Dragon Ball, but the circumstances around getting into the Pokemon commentary, can you take us through that?
Yeah, it was... Rocket League commentary was coming into its 2nd season, for me, my 2nd season, and I was looking to diversify and try some other games, and I watched the Pokemon TCG events and thought, you know what, I'd love to give that a go. And so I spoke to Joe, who at the time was, I wouldn't say he was a friend, like now I'm fairly close with Joe Bernard, who's one of the TCG commentators, and he was commentating at Worlds in London, and I went over to him and Ross and sort of asked them, like, how can I get involved? You know, how do I get involved in the commentary like you guys? And I remember Ross, in typical Ross fashion, just being the nicest guy and being like, hey, what I recommend is you just get started trying out some commentary, you know, just get used to speaking on camera and all this stuff. And at the time, Joe knew I was a Rocket League commentator, and Joe just sort of like laughed and joked and said, Ross, don't worry, he can do that bit, he just doesn't know how to do Pokemon yet. Something along those lines. And then I kept in touch with Joe about it, and he sort of sent me to Connor, who at the time was organising the commentators for the early streams for Europe. And he loved the background I had. He was really interested in getting me involved. And to be honest, he took a big risk because I didn't prove that I knew Pokemon at all. He just looked at my Rocket League resume and was like, well, that's probably good enough to be able to commentate on Pokemon. He says he knows the game, and you know, I'm gonna have to trust him on that. And I think there was an element of relief when I went out onto the broadcast in Warsaw and started talking about the game, using the correct terminology and everything. So yeah, they took a bit of a risk on me. And
those World Championships in London, I think, a seminal moment for so many of us. And all three of the people that you mentioned there, Ross, Joe, and Connor Hayward, I've had on this podcast, so do go and check out those episodes. There'll be cards at the end of the episode for you to click on and enjoy those. My other question on this front is, so you said you worked for Xatu Games, but what do you do now?
So I work at a company called Nugget, which is quite an innovative model to support YouTube creators. So we do investment into creators with upfront capital, and then we support them through the duration of the agreement to help them grow. The intention is the investment will grow them because of the things that they can spend that money on, but also through the support of the company. So my job is to find new creators and then also support the creators that we do have and help them grow with a gaming focus as well. So I've been really lucky to find something that links in with my background of content creation, having a lot of connections within the content world, but also the gaming and even the coaching side, right? Being able to support someone when they're trying to do something like content, which so many creators are alone in their content. You know, they're doing everything. They're a full production company on their own. And I love the idea of us coming in, helping people out at that moment to grow into this full multimedia business. Almost like I really resonated with the Wolfie episode of how he mentioned getting that support at that pivotal moment for him. And I feel like that's what we're going to be doing for so many creators, is we're going to create that pivotal moment and hopefully accelerate creators' growth into a large multimedia business.
Wow. Okay. Very inspiring. And it sounds like a very stimulating job as well. Very exciting. And yeah, of course, as you say, Wolf, another guest I've had on the show, Wolf Glick. That guy will be at the end too. It's now time to round out this dream team, Mike. So who's going to be Pokemon number 6?
Well, you mentioned earlier about Kingdra. That is not my Pokemon, but the idea that when you know someone whose favourite Pokemon is, you see it as a card, and you think, do you know what, I've got to get that for them. And there is one Pokemon that has almost overtaken my life, and I look out for it more than Metagross, and that is Megan's favourite Pokemon, Latios, which, I'll be honest with you, I look for it more than any other card. Whenever I go to a vendor or we're opening packs, I'm excited to find a Latios. You know, Pokemon Unite has just added Latios, and that's like got me more excited. I think Metagross is in there, but I don't even know. But I now know Latios is. And I think anyone out there who's got a partner or a friend whose favourite Pokemon is something they really care about, you know, they haven't just got like I don't know, this Pokemon. They have like something they genuinely obsess over. You see it everywhere, and you just always want to try and make their day by finding that Pokemon. That's why when I saw Kingdra, I instantly thought of you and was like, I've got to get that to you. But yeah, that's what's happened to me with Latios. And interestingly, Metagross and Latios are just one Pokemon between them in the National Pokedex, and that's Latias. So maybe there's some fate there if you want to get cheesy, but I had to put Latios in there because it has just sort of shaped the last year of my life as far as Pokemon, individual Pokemon are concerned.
That's wonderful. Metagross and Latios, definitely have a similar colour scheme as well.
Yes.
So they do complement each other pretty nicely there. Okay, well, a wonderful way to round out your dream team, and this means, Mike, that your complete dream team is Gengar, Umbreon, Porygon 2, Metagross, Dragapult, and Latios. So now we've got Generation 1, we've got Generation 2, we have 3, 8 with Dragapult, and then 3 again with Latios. So I guess Dragapult's the outlier there. We've got a couple of powerhouse Pokemon as well as a legendary on there. And yeah, going back to what you said at the beginning, you know, they look tough, but they have that emotional side to them as well. Yeah, I think Latios in particular really represents that. So now I have to ask you, Mike, of these 6 Pokemon, which will you choose to be your partner Pokemon?
Well, it would have to be Metagross, wouldn't it?
Metagross.
Yeah, it's my favourite Pokemon now. It was my closet favourite Pokemon for a while. I didn't realise. I would always do a playthrough of Metagross if I could. It just sometimes is quite logistically tricky to catch a Beldum early enough that it makes it viable. But I'll save up all my rare candies to catch that Beldum at any point in my playthrough to add it to the team.
Metagross, yep, a firm favourite. And now a slightly different kind of question for you, Mike. If you were a Pokemon, what do you think you'd be?
Oh, I was not prepared for this one. It would have to be something that is kind of bulky, but is kind of intelligent in a weird way, you know? Like it's like a psychic type that's a bit bulky. So maybe like a Oranguru. Maybe I'm just a little chunky Oranguru that's sitting there with its wisdom.
Or Metagross.
Or Metagross. I couldn't say Metagross. That would be so cheesy, but yeah. I'll be an Oranguru sitting on a Metagross.
I mean, you said bulky psychic type Pokemon, so we could definitely... An Oranguru sitting on a Metagross. Wow. I mean, like, I could almost see fighting as well because of your coaching.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
I don't really see you as a Medicham, though. I guess we'll go with Oranguru for now. But what do you all think? Do you agree that of all the Pokemon, Mike would be an Oranguru? Let us know in the comments, because we'd be fascinated to read. Speaking of you all, it's time for your community questions. I posted online, as I always do, asking for questions for Mike, and thank you so much for submitting them. I apologise that I won't be able to feature all of them, and I apologise if I mispronounce any of your names or handles. To kick things off here, Norwich Trash would like to know, and I quote, "Hi Mike, I hope you're well. Through your career, your favourite event to work and why?"
So that's a guy called Ross, who I used to work with at Zatu. He was a TCG collector as well, Pokemon trading card game guy. So I always love chatting with him about stuff at work. But what event? What event? So weirdly, the event that I always think of is actually RLCS, Rocket League Championship Series, Season 8, which was the one we came second at. And I think it was because it was this great end of an era. The storylines behind it were incredible. And it was the first event where coaches were allowed on stage with their team. So it was this beautiful feeling of being on stage behind the players and soaking up the atmosphere like that and feeling every moment with them. We ended up losing in the final by 1 goal in Game 7 in a best-of-7 overtime, so next goal wins. So it could have gone either way. And the team that beat us, the storyline was beautiful. They beat us. One of my favourite players, Garrett G, won against us. And I very rarely get excited for people beating me in anything, but this was one of those moments where I almost felt joy for them more than I felt the hurt of loss. And so it was this poetic, beautiful ending in Madrid with them winning, but also it was the end of the era before COVID. So it was the final event of 8 seasons where we had a bunch of lands throughout the season. The storyline was beautiful, and it was that end of a chapter. So that's the one that I think I always imagined to be my favourite memory.
Wow. Really well put. And as you say, there's nothing like, in whatever capacity you're on that stage, just being on there and trying to breathe in the moment. Incredible. Well, thank you very much for that question. And now, a question from Megan. Do you get more fear of missing out playing or casting?
Yeah, this is a tough one. I used to get fear of missing out casting that I wasn't coaching in the Rocket League world. Yeah. With Pokemon, I've mostly casted. I got a chance to play at EUIC, and I had so much fun playing. But the moment I was out the tournament, I was like, I wish I was commentating now, you know? But I think next season I'm hoping to play more. And I think I'll start to form a fear of missing out of playing, because I am a competitor at heart. I love competing under pressure. I love the feeling of that heart rate rising as you're in those final few turns of a Pokemon battle and not knowing whether it's going to go your way and trying to work out the final route. And whilst commentary is exhilarating and fun, and it's obviously the stability of it, you always make the final, it definitely is more fun to play. But I'm very thankful that I get to commentate.
I guess coming off the back of what you just said there, as someone who got into trading card game commentary because of your background in esports, etc., rather than as a player necessarily, how have you found that adapting? I mean, you mentioned, there was that broadcast where you wish you knew the players better, but how have you found getting into the community that way?
I think it's been quite nice because I earned my respect rather than, becoming a commentator and people, giving me the respect before it was due. There's nothing wrong with a community figure going into commentary and everyone having that want for them to do well. But I came in, no one knew who I was in the Pokemon community. So the fact that I have formed these relationships with other commentators, with players and so on, I feel like everyone I've ever interviewed I have an amazing relationship with, because they have that memory of the moment where we were on stage together and it went really well. And that for me is quite a special feeling. And so I'm very proud that I started fresh in Pokemon. I started a new social media account. I started a new personality because I no longer was Greg and I was Mike. And so I'm very proud that I put myself into this new beginning and am where I am. But I think there's one thing that people still don't know is how good I am as a player. Like, I haven't had a chance to compete in a big regional event. Locally, I'm reasonably strong player, and people are aware of that. But it's a very different game going to a regional where you're playing against, like, I played against Stefan Ivanov, one of the best players in Europe, French player, at EUIC, and I bottled it because I got nervous playing against someone who I highly respected. And I remember I was 4-0, so I was in a really good position at EUIC, and Jesper shouted across at me, one of the other TCG commentators. He said, "What are you doing here?" So there is still that kind of unknown around competitive ability that I'm quite excited to try out in the future and maybe earn some more respect in a different way.
Very interesting. Very exciting. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you for that. Now, final question here from the Weevil 2000. And again, I quote this: "I'm a huge fan of GREGAN in all his forms of work.
Oh,
How does he feel Rocket League coaching has changed from when you began up to now, or to the latest that you know?
It's professionalized a lot. There is a lot more requirement for the coaching, as players have got to get those little edges. I think it's a very similar thing in the Pokemon community. If any of your listeners are fans of competitive Pokemon, they'll see that coaching has become particularly prominent, especially in the seniors divisions, where younger players need that advice to get an edge. And Rocket League was a very young esport when I worked in it. You know, I won the world championship with a 15-year-old who had only been competing at RLCS for a year. He had been competing in other ways before, but there's a lot of support needed for that. And many of the top players in recent history have been 15 to 18. And so having that support through maturity and advice and structure, and being there when the going gets tough, but also to be able to motivate them when it gets easy. There's a lot of reasons why coach is fundamentally important. And with the increased budget and quality of a lot of the top organizations, I think you can really see how they've been supported better, because coaches can be coached as well. You know, every role in a team can be supported and developed. And so I think the resources out there has just got better and better. And consequently, the quality has just got better and better.
Wonderful. Really insightful answer. Thank you very much for all of your questions there. If you'd like to submit a question for a future guest on Chazingdra Chats, you can find my socials at Chazingdra across X, Blue Sky, Instagram, TikTok, and of course YouTube. That's where I post the call-outs for the questions. I would love to hear what you'd love to hear. All right then, Mike, so I've heard a lot about you up to now, but what's next for you?
Well, we have some amazing Pokemon events coming in the future, which I'm excited to commentate. I'm excited to travel around the world with Pokemon. And I think with this whole Nugget thing I mentioned earlier on, who knows where that's going to take us. And I can't wait to support people in a different way. Having coached competitive esports players, you know, I've coached sport. I've done all these different ways to support people. But I can't wait to see that first YouTuber who grows significantly under the support of Nugget and myself, because I get so much joy out of other people's success. So that's probably going to be my next big milestone is that.
Wonderful. So many irons that you have in the fire, and we cannot wait to see where they take you. Now, final question for you, Mike. Looking back from now, as Pokemon trading card game commentator, someone who's got so much experience with Rocket League and other games, all the way back to the young Mike, part of the official Nintendo Magazine community Facebook page and trying to find connections through there, what advice would you give to that young you?
Search for your local Play Pokemon store and get involved, because you'd have loved it. You'd have loved it. Oh, the joy I'd have had competing as a senior, traveling around the UK, competing. Honestly, those are the years that I've missed out on, not being able to compete in Pokemon for longer, because sport was a competitive outlet, but as a nerd, being able to use your nerdiness in a competitive way. I tried chess when I was younger, played for my county, didn't feel that spot in my nerdy competitive self. I needed something that I fully resonated with, and watching little monsters battle it out would have been the dream.
That could be the tagline for this episode, we'll have to see. But it all comes full circle. Well, thank you very much indeed for that, Mike. And the chat's not in there, because now we'll be getting into Mike Ellis's Rapidash round. 15 or so minutes of bonus questions that Mike is not prepared for. And as with all my guests, there are so many more things that I want to take a deeper dive into. Mike mentioned earlier how he was optimizing the coaching he did within Rocket League, working out how best to play the game. I want to take a deeper dive into that and generally his approach to the coaching, the advice that Mike would give to aspiring casters. I want to know any hidden talents or fun facts about Mike, as well as talking about things beyond Pokemon. If that sounds of interest to you, if you want to hang out with me and Mike for a little bit longer, then you can join us on Patreon or become a YouTube channel member, where you get access to 4 bonus videos a month in the form of these Rapidash rounds, as well as plenty more perks. Fundamentally, really appreciate the fact that you've listened to or watched this episode in its entirety, but if you do want to get to know Mike that little bit better, then the options available to you, the links are in the description below. But Mike, for now, thank you so much for joining me on Chazingdra Chats. It's been really fascinating to, especially as a caster myself, to get your insight into all the experience you've had. And again, thank you for your honesty with everything you've shared.
No, I love the format of the podcast. I think it's such a unique way to tell people's stories through those chapters and the Pokemon, and I can't wait to listen to other people's stories on here.
Oh, thanks so much, Mike, and no, the pleasure was all mine having you on. So, if we want to keep up with you online, where can they find you?
For Pokemon stuff, Mike Ellis PTCG on Twitter, and then my Rocket League /main Twitter is GREGAN, or X. Search GREGAN and you might find me, or you might find an Australian scrum half from 2003.
So now time for some YouTube spiel from this side of things. If you've enjoyed, everybody, once more, please do like and subscribe. It would mean a huge amount, and they do go such a long way, far further than they might seem. Drop a comment too. Mike, as with all my guests, has given us so much food for thought. We'd love to know what you think. And this is one of more than 60 episodes of the podcast at this point, and a broad range of guests in the video game, trading card game, Go, Unite, as well as more casual players, shiny hunters, YouTubers, the works. There's bound to be something for everyone. You can use the hashtag 6Pokemon1LifeStory to spread the word about the show, and there's plenty more content on the channel too. Silly Pokemon comedy skits that I make with my background as an actor, writer, comedian, vlogs of the events that I cast, and far more content currently in the works. I'm working on a couple of scripts right now, so exciting times ahead. I also stream competitively, casually, and Nuzlocke. If you're a fan of everything that Pokemon video games have to offer, then my channel is the place for you. Got my Discord community link below as well. Come and join Chazingdra's Chocolate Factory. Join the merry folk. We would love to welcome you in there. I'm at Chazingdra across all socials, and episodes of this podcast drop every Wednesday. And with that being said, Mike, it's time to get into your Rapidash round. So, if you're not joining us on Patreon or as a YouTube channel member for that, then it's goodbye from Mike.
Goodbye.
And it's goodbye from me. See you next time on Chazingdra Chats, where there'll be another 6 Pokemon, 1 life story. So then, Mike, how are you feeling about these bonus questions?
I'm excited. Honestly, I just love the questions you're asking. Like, every single one of them has been an absolute banger. So the Rapidash round is just an excuse for more.
I'm very pleased to hear it. Well, let's keep it going right away. What advice would you give to aspiring casters, given all of the experience that you've had?
I think the easiest route now to get into commentary is